before the content of what we are presenting here is coming from a 13-page, very detailed study that is done back with top professors and industry leaders back in US. That paper is there in our Solix website. You can go and download that. It is about fourth generation enterprise AI platform. And what it's going to talk about is, today we talked about a lot of data, and we also talked about the agents. But what happens in between? There are so much things that happens under the hood of the system that everybody should be aware of. And I will walk you through some, given the time, I might need to rush through certain things. I might leave some questions open-ended, but that's not by mistake, that's by intentionally. Okay, so now if you think about, there is an MIT paper come few months ago, this MIT Boston, US, and they boldly said 95% of the AI pilot projects failed to reach production. Now, you can see that as a researcher, because these are all coming from an academic side, right? Now, outside that, if you can also see and read this as a practitioner or a solution provider or even a consultant, doesn't matter, but at the end, it is going to hit through why these pilot projects are not able to make to production is for these reasons. For the interest of time, I'm not going to read all these things. I want to call out one or two. We all talked about federated data, but the most important thing in this space is also the rise of unstructured data. Unlike before, the fourth generation system should be able to handle the unstructured data. Either it is pharma, healthcare, wherever Solix is deeply involved in, you will see that. MCP's agentic, we talked a lot, and the governance space is a little tricky, right? Now, when you talk about governance, you want to do governance, but how are you going to do that is the implementation aspect is what I'm going to talk. Cost versus ROI, we all talked, but the point I want to make quickly around the ROI is you cannot always prove an ROI, but you can always ask the executive question. This is another one, okay? So the idea for ROI is the cost of inaction. Say, for example, instead of always, you can't prove ROI in a very practical sense when you're doing a pilot project or production, and a lot of these things has probably no ROI in real terms, especially on the earlier stage of the project. So now the idea of that is executives can ask the other way around, right? What is the cost of inaction? What that means is if you don't do this transformation today, how are you going to be in the market tomorrow? How, when your competitor moves on, what is your position at that point in time? So you can put the ROI in a different perspective and ask the same question, you will get a different answers, right? Which is more positive to us. This stack of AI, agentic AI, MCP servers, algorithms, everything is continuously bringing more and more knowledge. When you want to implement this, your organizational readiness is highly critical, because doing a pilot with 3 members, proving a point to an executive, I did an awesome job, great, this is working, that's one part of it. But when you take that to a production grade system, you have to consider the entire SDLC process, all the people involved from top to bottom, whether they are equipped with these kind of technologies, whether they are cross-skilled, upskilled, wherever it is necessary, whether you have the new process for the new technologies when you introduce an agent, if it fails or if it is hallucinating, what are your actions? What is your SOP for that? So you need to clearly understand. These are all some of the critical things. If you take all these issues, you can put them into 3 different compliance buckets. One is around the data lineage, the model being trained, because all of them you need to capture to explain if there is an audit, if something goes wrong, if there is an audit, you need to have an explainability of all this content, all the results, all the predictions you are doing. So there is a lot of things around the raising data compliance. I will show you a lot more on that. One is on the data, but at the same time, there is a tool. You are going to use all the developers, if you go and ask, they are going to use every open source available. But who controls that? Where is that open source created? What is that source? Is it coming from a restricted country? You never know. You need to go to that level of depth when you talk about compliance, not on the data, not on your business functions, but also all the tools you use in between. That's the second core part. Now, the third core part is about the data monetization. When AI comes into play, your historical intelligence is going to come into play. Now, what that means is when you unarchive this data, This unarchived data should go to the compliance. For example, every country, they want to protect their data now. They are not ready to share to any other country. That becomes a federated governance policies. Now for that, when you unarchive, historically you might said, okay, take all the data and put it in a central container and operate. But when you unarchive, now you have to start governing it in the respective locations. Otherwise, you are not following the data sovereignty principles. So this is at the three big buckets within the compliance you need to be careful to address in different senses. So now on the agentic side, we all talk about agents, but I want to pick, right? What is an ethical oversight to an agent? If you simply think about what is an agent doing, agent is basically you are going to replace a human's monotonous, result-oriented, target-driven activity to an agent, which has a thinking, reasoning skills, and on top of it, now you are adding an ethical. Now, what is this ethical in a real world to a human? How are you going to apply? Is it, if the same task done by a human, what is ethical means to a human? So you need to balance that act. What is ethical means to an agent, right? Of course, it has to come with the tools, technologies, skills that we are adding. But agentic services, when you enable, that has this very specific set, not system controls, but human level controls has to be tested there. One other big area which not much explored is agent are like every agent is like a human workforce, right? They have their own private spaces in the infrastructure, so it is going to enormously increase your infrastructure cost. But it is for a good thing. So you have to optimize them. You have to have a circulation process and then connectivity between the agents when they handshake every other task inputs and outputs. So that space in which resource optimizations and whatever exchanges are happening has to be tightly controlled and governed in addition to whatever we talked. Irrespective of all these compliance restrictions, if you see the surveys coming from enterprises, 78% of enterprises saying they are actively involved in AI projects moving towards the next step. Now, this is 23% net increase from year over year from 23 to 24. So the engine has already passed. Whether you are going to get on or catch up, it doesn't matter. The engine has started. It's moving at a fast pace. Now, you have to make sure you are adapting to that. Otherwise, you could become obsolete. So the idea here is how fast you are transforming. And there are platforms like Solix where we are going to help. I will show you how we are helping the industries to transform to this speed, taking you from where you are today to become AI ready. And that's the story of the fourth generation AI platforms. When you look into the market, across every other industry, there are compliance. These are all anticipatory. Morning, we heard 190,000 um, anticipatory, like regulations being changed every year. These are all like specifically to all the different industries. It could be finance, it could be healthcare, it could be pharma, the retail, and manufacturing, which is predictive maintenance and everything. But the idea behind all these things is you need to have solid metadata lineage because you need to track all the changes that is happening to your data. You should have the tracing and tracking capability, data sovereignty principles we talked about, and also the consumer privacy, which is basically the PII, PHI, and the anti-discrimination. All of them also falls into the agentic ethics we talked about, the bias we talk about. These are all very, very standard when it comes to the default applications. Anything you build with AI, you should consider all these things. Now, for finance specific, these are all the, we already talked, I'm not going to spend time here, all the applications that you can enable with the AI. But fundamentally, the goal of all these things, when you enable AI, is still has to be in real time. It should be making faster decision to get the money you want to capture, right? It should help fundamentally the revenue. If it doesn't apply to the revenue increase, then these agents are not. So the use cases you select from finance or any industry perspective from the get-go is highly critical. Otherwise, you are not going to see the value of any of these agents that is going to be in play. Now, the question, if you look into whatever I talked so far is all about problems, the challenges, the compliance issues, everything. Now, what does this really means to the next generation is criticality, right? If you think about this, now, the basic fundamental question we have to ask is this really with so much complexity, so much tools that can we even govern this properly with all the things in between that is happening? Now, what does governance mean here is very simple, right? When you take it down to the root level, it is nothing but your enterprise assets are spread all over the place. Now, can you make them when the user, when I say user, user is an endpoint, user, agent, application, reporting, whatever it means, right? At the endpoint, between the data and between the endpoint, can you convert these data to be easily consumed at the endpoint so that you can make the source wherever the assets, estates, or data AI ready, right? So if you can make that one thing good, like wherever your data assets, you make governance and compliance at source, and we'll talk about the techniques and all, but the idea here is to say, you take your existing information architecture, do certain XYZ things for AI governance, so that it becomes fully controlled and compliant, then any AI applications or any end applications can start taking advantage of. You have to start from top to bottom governance first mindset. What it means is you have to go through the enterprise, get all the assets you have, inventory them, how it is used, what are all the information architectures that are sitting behind them, what are the systems and the integration points. So you need to first take a full landscape of all the informations you have from your information architecture ecosystem. Now, once you do that, you will have some guidelines, right? Because of the data sovereignty rules, you will know what data you can unify, what data you cannot unify, because that is highly critical, because otherwise you will fall into a compliance trap. So that leads to the third principle. Your system should be able to cope up the zero data copy. What that means is certain times I should be able to integrate in the unified layer. Certain times I should not by compliance, right? You should leave them. Now, when you do this as that, how are you going to get the intelligence, especially with zero data copy? We all know the trouble when this happens across connecting to multiple sources when you operate on that. So the idea here is you need to have a unified metadata repository. We will talk more on the metadata repository because that is going to be your crux for this whole holy grail of this is going to be two things. One is metadata repository and the semantic layer. What is metadata repository is basically you should take every asset in your data estate, discover and assess them for what is the classification, what are the sensitivity levels, and keep adding metadata, which is more knowledge, SME, subject matter expertise, right? That's what they provide to that, right? In a real world, when we put human into that, there is a subject matter expertise. So the metadata will drive all the information about your data. That includes classifications, sensitivity levels, responsible values, and also the explainability. If I define certain things XYZ, why I am defining that as XYZ, so that you have a reasoning capability there. So all of them has to be centralized. Now, if you want to get a unified knowledge, you have in a central place. Even though the data is spread across, you have the unified knowledge store, centrally managed and governed. Now, on top of that, now you bring the semantic layer. What is a semantic layer is? Take this metadata, add your business ontologies and taxonomies, here I want to talk about a little bit security, right? Because when you want to access this information outside, semantic layer is the gateway. Now, that semantic gateway should also have all the integration points across your systems that came through the metadata, and then the access control mechanisms. Now, access control mechanism in a traditional sense, it's RBAC. Typically, if you ask an engineer or anybody, say, oh, okay, we have apply a role-based access. But I can say here, rollback is going to fail. Very soon you will see it. And that reason is of the unstructured data and the complex data structure you want. Because AI is not about what data you have. AI is also about what data it is creating. If you use a Gen AI applications on top of your data, it is you can guardrail it with what data you have, but you don't know what data it is going to come out because Gen AI is going to create data. Now you don't have a way to control. So RBAC alone is not going to be enough. So in semantic layer, you will have policy-based controls. When you add the policy-based controls, then you will know it is going to be very generic. So the output of any Gen AI application, when you tighten that with policy-based, then you will have a restriction. So you will see that. Now, all these things are for at the end point is your chatbots or AI application. So you have to tighten these 6 principles in any platform to become AI ready. Once you apply this principle, because it is not just a process, it is a fully, each layer has a technology behind it to assess, to integrate, to monitor, and semantic layer, we will talk one more step. So these 6 principles, if you carry on, that itself for this particular keynote, that 6 principle is good enough, actually. So as long as you remember these 6 principles, that's all the 4th generation systems are going to build it for. Okay, we have the 6 principles, but how are you going to implement? How are you going to deploy this, right? Deployment is very different. Now you know the metadata, what it does, you know what semantic layer, but you need a framework. Now this framework itself is a 3-layered approach because there is a foundationally, there is an infrastructure, we all know that, that has hyperscalers, that has data, storage, compute, GPU, CPUs, everything is there as a foundational layer. Now on top of it, you are adding operational intelligence about what you don't know. Because if you take any enterprise asset, if I give you 100 table schema or 100 files, possibility of you knowing everything will not be greater than 25%. So what is this 75%? You should know that, because without knowing that, if you operate AI, it is going to do all sort of things and you don't know what is happening. So that is an operational tier which will manage it. And the semantic layer is connected to your experience, where it will control what users want and translate accordingly. Now, we talked about what is this metadata layer, right? Because unified metadata layer is the holy grail I already mentioned, because that is the connecting tissue for your existing information architecture to become AI-enabled application. And the reason is, this particular layer, we already talked about having the entire knowledge base across all the application systems, controls you have, even though they are in different places. Now, on top of it, this metadata is core and it is like your business data for AI. Unlike the past, usually metadata is a last thought process till now, if you think about it. If you take and if you ask, hey, I have 1,000 columns, 1,000 informations, how many informations really you know the definition? It will be very, very less. Now, this particular one, you have to make at least 90% plus, because you have so many tools on the other end, free form, that can operate very differently. For them to be knowledgeable at a SME level capacity, you need to have all these informations. Now, you should treat this metadata also like a business data. And why? You should have a lineage, like if a metadata definition changes, your result on 2 different points, what you predict, what you respond, everything changes. Now, if there is an audit, you need to be able to explain why you made the decision on that day, and that decision should be archived, right? If you change the definition, your past definition is different than a new definition. ACV, AOV, TCV, whatever you do, it is going to change based on your sales and other processes. Now, you need to have those lineages. You need to have, every time it changes, there is a date stamp, time stamp, everything you do, you need to have it. And on the semantic layer, this is where the human controls come. Because semantic layer consolidated already your metadata. Now you already have the taxonomies, you have ontologies. Now human control is, basically when I say humans here, they are all the top stewards, SMEs, who knows what is going behind, and they should verify whatever at least all the AI created, so that they can validate and approve these changes. This is a central control, because this is the gateway for consumption layer. So they will control, humans has to control, and this will be owned and controlled by them, especially stewards, maybe custodians in some cases, depending upon the subject matter. Now, if you see, this is what we talked about, right? The foundational layer is to establish the control at your infrastructure. Second layer is around operational, and the third. The 6 principles, if you see, the first 3 principles are foundational. The intelligent data classification we talked about is an operational tier where you enrich your metadata. The semantic layer is your experience, which is the 5th and 6th, right? So this layer, you have to arrange it accordingly and tighten this in the deployment. What Solix has is, if you see here, we can manage all the federated data management plus the entire lifecycle, information lifecycle management is bundled as a core layer. We have a Solix lakehouse. We have inbuilt data fabric layers and the IDCs, IDGs, all the semantic layers. These are all different technologies, tools that are powered by AI. And this one is telling you the entire architecture. The abstract of this is only one thing. The first 3 generations, you have enough time, right? If you think about starting from, like, it took 20 years to move to the 2nd generation. Then it took another 10 years to go to the 3rd generation. When I say generation, I'm saying Oracle, then big data, Hadoop, then Snowflake, Databricks, etc. Now from there, it took only 4 years we are talking about this. So in the past, till 3rd generation, you have the luxury of time and money to do data movement across every time. You don't have that luxury anymore. People are going to ask you 10x speed, 20x speed. And if you keep moving data, your 80% of the dollar spent is in there today, if you think about it. So all of them will go away. So the idea for Solix platform is we take these governance, compliance controls, everything is a microservice-based architecture. We take this wherever your data is. We don't want to bring unless it is needed, which means that that's the fastest way of implementing, not now, even for future. There will not be any more data movement. It's very, very high cost experience. We talked about this, we can skip. The idea here is to show, given the tools and technologies you have with vibe coding or Copilot, the number of ETL steps can be drastically reduced, and this is also because the metadata layer, because metadata layer is your SME already. If you do it right, it has got all the intelligence you need. And with vibe coding, with the proper metadata and semantic layer, your ETL process can be redefined in a different way. Of course, architecturally, it is not like a pass, drag and drop kind of thing. That's not going to be very efficient. But using agentic, that's what I'm talking about here. With that flow, you can definitely save the time and speed. That's how you're going to get the results. The idea is how fast you can deliver the key capabilities that has high ROI, delivering at a less time. Less time means less money you are delivering it, right? So what is the plan? Typically how we do it is, it's 0 to 6 months or 9 months plan. The first step is more focus on getting the foundations ready. All the things I talked about is foundational. Once you finish the foundational, then 9 to 18 months you can choose your choice and then start building the use cases, because that is the easier part once you know, because you have tremendous amount of AI tools, open sources, the existing technologies and everything. So the first 3 to 9 months goal to create the foundation is highly critical. All the 6 principles I mentioned hacked in this 3 to 9 months period. What are the new kind of skills that is going to evolve? I want to touch a bit. I'm not sure how many of you know, like if you are 25 years of experience, you have a deep expertise in this, what are you going to do with this AI? Also you're coding, right? So if you think about it, you will see every stack is going to uplift themselves. A 60% person is now going to work as an 80% efficiency. And 80% person with AI tools will go to 90. 99. The biggest break where it is going to happen is this, right? In the past, experience played a critical role, not for tomorrow, because AI give you the experience you want for the first 5 years at a minimum. If I am a fresher, I'm coming out of college, Where I am stuck today is I don't have the industry knowledge. I don't have the industry experience about a subject. Now I cross that barrier with AI because when I ask that, it is going to tell me at least 60% correct. So that is the place it is going to play, and we have to keep pushing that. Now there are many roles. So AI product management is a very highly critical role because of the complex ecosystem that is coming up. The tools and technologies, the integration is highly critical. Especially I'm talking about AI integration and building small language models specific to your niche area. That is going to become core. Not the least, if you have not heard, there is a new role that is evolving called basically FDEs. This is a deployed, front-end deployed engineers. Who they are is these are all strategic advisors who has both technical, functional, and business knowledge. So they will act as your FDEs to face your customers. And typically that is the place little more experienced people can really put some effort and move into this direction of FDE, which will give a tremendous value. Now at the end, this is my last slide. So at the end set, this starts from the top. It cannot go bottom up because there are so many moving parts, so many commitments, everything is involved in this. So to make a successful AI transition, it should be a top-down approach. You can do many things at the lowest level, but that's not going to cut it. At some point, it has to be the deployment should start from, like the governance first mindset should start from the get-go at the CXO's level and then trickle down till the end point, whoever is doing it every day, day in and day out. So with that, I would thank you. Thank you. This is the last slide. And this is the website, solix.com and the Enterprise AI. You can download much more richer details around whatever I talked about if you are interested. Thank you.